The American dream promises success and happiness, but for some, the dream shatters, becoming a breeding ground of monsters. An aspiring rock star, a wanderer dreaming of adventure, a young man hearing voices in his Long Island mansion. They were all chasing the dream, only to become the darkest nightmares. Today, we're diving into three of the most chilling true crime stories in American culture. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, Vincent Bugliosi's Helter Skelter, and Jay Anson's Amityville Horror.
You're listening to the True Crime Podcast. My name is Anton.
My name is Oliver.
My name is Konrad.
My name is Tiantian.
And Tiantian, could you tell us also more about what we're talking about today?
Yeah, let me introduce these three cases. In 1959, the Quilton of Holcomb, Kansas was shattered when the Halbert Carter's family were brutally murdered by the two intruders, Richard Hickok and Perry Smith. In 1969, Charles Manson commanded his followers to carry out a series of murders in Los Angeles, including the pregnant actress Sharon Tate. Susan, known as Sadie, was one of his devoted killers. Finally, we traveled to Amityville on Long Island. In 1974, Ronald DeFeo shot and killed his entire family there. A year later, the Lewis family moved in, only to flee in terror after 28 days, claiming supernatural harassment.
And I actually think that one of the most interesting parts of the cases are the killers. Because the big question is, why do they kill? What made them kill? What's the psychology and motivation behind it? You know, neither Perry or Sadie had actually murdered anyone before, although Perry was in the army when he was younger. He boasted of killing a black man, although this was really just never proven to have happened, and it was probably to impress his partner Dick. He did have some violent tendencies, but like Susan, he had bad influences early in life. He experienced poverty, his mother became a drunkard and a hooker, and his dad was abusive and at one point even tried to kill him. Happy family there. His reasoning for killing Clutter family was not only this, but it was a bunch of cash and also to impress Dick. Mm-hmm. And like him, Susan had parental issues and family troubles. According to her, both her parents were alcoholics, and her mother died when she was only 16. Then her father abandoned her, and eventually she ended up being a stripper, after which she was picked up by Manson. Like others, she readily took to the drugs that Manson gave her, and she really wanted to impress him. Then there's DeFeo, a troubled young man who used heroin, LSD, and frequently drank. So his case is less comparable to the others, although he did allegedly have a voice in his head that acted sort of like a manipulator, akin to Dick with Perry or Manson with Susan.
Mm-hmm. Although I think that was probably just a way to shift blame away from himself.
Perhaps a fabrication of the defense team for this case, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, what this does demonstrate is that early influences are important and is a major feature of true crime, before the modern psychology we have today was fully developed.
Mm-hmm. And even to this day, it's a hotly discussed topic how much the influences in your early life lead to criminal behavior, or if people are just
That's true.
born criminals, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll come back to that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyway, all three, they had some kind of vision of an American dream or a better station in life. Perry wanted to be an adventurer or treasure hunter. Susan wanted a new life with Manson as her savior. And DeFeo was likely in it for more pragmatic reasons. He wanted his family's inheritance, although again, this can't really be proven. But as we know, all this only led to tragedy, and the only thing they succeeded in doing was destroying the American dream for others. But there's actually someone more interesting, isn't there?
Yeah, you could say that again. There's, at least in one of the stories, in one of the tellings, especially in the Helter Skelter, we have a main person, Charles Manson, who is this very infamous, charismatic, evil character.
Yeah. Charismatic to some, certainly. Some types of people.
Yeah. He at least got a lot of attention, also from people who disliked him, for sure. But Manson also had a very tough childhood. He actually grew up and spent a lot of time in prison. When he came out, he had ambitions to be a rock star. He learned how to play guitar in prison. He was especially inspired by the Beatles when they came up in the 60s. He wanted to be a rock star like them, to be admired by so many people for his talents.
Just to get an insight into what kind of person he was, he seemed to genuinely believe that if people weren't so against him, he might have become bigger than the Beatles,
Oh, yes.
which
Oh,
is, you know, a tall order.
Yeah,
Maybe.
John Lennon said the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, and Manson wanted to be more popular than both.
Yeah.
Instead, he made a family, the Manson family, and it was not entirely a nice family, not at all.
That's certainly
Most
one
would
way to
say.
put it.
Yeah, which is especially targeted, you would say now, young and lost, vulnerable people who was looking for meaning, especially in these changing times in the 60s. And then he was, what you call love bombed them, latched himself onto them until they was bound by him, was inspired by him, and
once they got completely lashed onto him, and that's when, again, as you said, love bombing, a term they didn't have back then. But
and we at least two other techniques that we also used to explain this phenomenon. The Manson family was a lot of drugs, first of
A lot of drugs.
and seclusion, isolation. They spent most of the time out in the desert by the Spahn Range, just outside Los Angeles.
But far away enough to be isolated, it should be noted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was
and Manson, you know, very, very directly and actively and intentionally manipulated these people by, you know, taking less LSD than they did and planting all these ideas in their head.
Exactly.
And also used a lot of sex to really reinforce relationships between him and the members and control who could do what.
Yeah,
when.
and the members were mostly just clear underage girls.
Yeah.
Just to really drive home how vulnerable these people were. But of course, no matter how vulnerable or manipulated you are, it does not justify brutally murdering a pregnant woman in her home and telling her to her face you're killing her, that you don't give a shit about her.
Yeah.
Excuse my French.
And we also have just around in Cold Blood as well. And we have Dick Hickok, who was especially portrayed by in the book in Cold Blood to be the evil guy, the instigator of this this plot to steal.
Not pure evil, but certainly a scoundrel.
Yeah, a scoundrel. He was driven by his impulses, by greed, by sex. He was also
a pedophile.
A pedophile, straight up. You could say that, I think. But also streetwise and charming, using Perry as a tool that could get him these things that he wants.
And just like the members of the Manson family, you know, he was clearly manipulated, though not as aggressively as they were, but clearly manipulated by Dick.
Exactly. It was more through force of character than drugs and sex.
Yeah.
So perhaps Dick could have made a following if he really wanted to, but for now, all he needed was Perry, who he called, you know, a natural killer.
And I think it's important to note that even though all these killers, Dick and Manson as well, both the manipulators and the people that were manipulated, had very difficult lives, I think it's important to note that doesn't justify any of that kind of behavior.
We do not.
But I do think that maybe someone like Perry, who is portrayed as a somewhat sympathetic character in Capote's book, if he had two normal, loving parents and hadn't been abused, hadn't had his accident that left him in chronic pain as well, you know, I think it's likely that, I mean, he met Dick in prison, so if he'd had a normal, stable life, he maybe wouldn't have been the best guy, but probably would not have ended up like this. And I think the same goes for, you know, most of the members of the Manson family. And I think it shows this you know, failure of the American dream, that once you're marginalized by polite society in this way, you are much more vulnerable to. I mean, if you, for example, like Perry, already have violent impulses, those impulses are going to be reinforced and strengthened by your position in society.
It certainly doesn't help.
Certainly doesn't help.
Also,
go ahead.
Very telling for this time with this new genre, true crime, that they want to show another side of these brutal murders, that there's people behind it.
There's real people behind it, and that is important to remember, I think. Although it should be noted that all these books, especially the Amityville Horror, are dramatized to some degree. I think we can all agree that the Amityville Horror is almost pure fiction. The Lutzes allegedly admitted as much during a trial. But I think the Lutzes making this, you know, book shows that they also wanted to make some money and achieve some kind of independence in this American dream.
Yeah, the other two books, while dramatized, probably are more grounded in reality. And
there's definitely evidence for these things having happened.
That is
unlike
not so much evidence for
Anson's
the
book. But still, you know, Capote struck up a friendship with Perry, and Bugliosi was the person who prosecuted the Manson family. So both of these people still clearly have some kind of bias that needs to be considered when you're reading them.
But in any case, whether biased or not, the fact that these cases happened means that we can learn something from it. So as tragic as it is, there's still something to be learned from it. That's the moral.